It is starting now.
Okay.
Now we are live.
Okay, ಹಂಗಾದ್ರೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಲಕ್ಕಲ್ಲ. 10 minutes ಆಯ್ತು ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ. ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಕೃಷ್ಣಪ್ರಸಾದ್ ಬಾಳಿಕೆ ಹೇಳಿ. ಕೆನಡಿಯನ್ ಹವ್ಯಕ ಅಸೋಸಿಯೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಮೇರಿಕಾಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ಚಾ ಈಗ ಪ್ರಸ್ತುತಪಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಛಾಯಾಗ್ರಹಣೆ, ದ ಆರ್ಟ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಆದರದ ಸ್ವಾಗತ. ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ ಹೇಳೋದು ಕೆಲವರಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಆಸಕ್ತಿ ಇರುವಂತಹದ್ದು ಅಥವಾ ಕೆಲವರಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಕೈಗೆಟಕುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಕ್ರಿಯೆ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಈಗ ಡಿಜಿಟಲ್ ಕ್ಯಾಮ್ರಾಗಳು ಮತ್ತೆ ಸೆಲ್ ಫೋನ್ಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲ ಬಂದ ಮೇಲೆ ಈ ಕ್ಯಾಮ್ರಾ ಹೇಳೋದು ಎಲ್ಲರ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲೂ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ವಸ್ತು. ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಆಸಕ್ತಿ ಇದೆ, ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಫೋಟೋ ತೆಗಿಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಆಸಕ್ತಿ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಇರ್ತದೆ. ಅದು ಅಲ್ಲದೆ ಈಗ ಈ ಸೋಷಿಯಲ್ ಮೀಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ತಾವು ತೆಗೆದಂತಹ ಫೋಟೋವನ್ನು ಅಥವಾ ತಾವು ಕಂಡಂತಹ ದೃಶ್ಯವನ್ನು ಸೆರೆ ಹಿಡಿದು ಬೇರೆಯವರಿಗೂ ಅದನ್ನು ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಆಸಕ್ತಿ ಕೂಡ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಜನರಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುತ್ತದೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಹಾಗೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಥಮಿಕ ನಾಲೆಜ್ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಬೇಸಿಕ್ ನಾಲೆಜ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಇನ್ನೂ ಕೂಡ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. ಅದು ಹಾಗೆ ಅಲ್ಲದೆ ಈಗ ಬೇರೆಯವರು ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಬೇರೆಯವರು ತೆಗೆದಂತಹ ಫೋಟೋವನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಅದು ಫೋಟೋವನ್ನು ಅಪ್ರಿಶಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಆ ಫೋಟೋ ಯಾಕೆ ಅದು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಬಂತು, ಆ ಫೋಟೋ ತೆಗೆಯುವುದರ ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆ ಏನು, ಅಥವಾ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ ಅದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಏನು ಥಾಟ್ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ತರ ಆ ಫೋಟೋ ತೆಗೆದು ಈ ಫೋಟೋ ಎಷ್ಟು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಬಂತು ಎನ್ನುವುದನ್ನು ತಿಳಿಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅದರ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಬೇಸಿಕ್ ನಾಲೆಜ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರ್ತದೆ. ಈ ಉದ್ದೇಶದಿಂದ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತು ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ, ಛಾಯಾಗ್ರಹಣೆ ಎನ್ನುವ ಶೀರ್ಷಿಕೆಯೊಂದಿಗೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ಹವ್ಯಕ ಸಮಾಜದಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರತಿಭೆಗೆ ಯಾವ ಕೊರತೆಯೂ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗೆ ಈ ಛಾಯಾಗ್ರಹಣೆಯ ಪ್ರತಿಭೆ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊಂದಿದಂತಹ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸಾಧನೆ ಮಾಡಿದವರು ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇಕಾದಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನನಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಹೆಮ್ಮೆಯ ವಿಷಯ. ಇದು ನಮ್ಮ ಸಮಾಜದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಷನಲ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ಅಮೆಚೂರ್ ಆಗಲಿ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಅದ್ಭುತವಾದಂತಹ ಸಾಧನೆ ಮಾಡಿದವರು ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅಂಥವರನ್ನು ಕರೆದು ಇಂತಹ ಈ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ಬಹಳ ಒಂಥರ ಸಂತೋಷದ ವಿಷಯ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಇನ್ನೊಮ್ಮೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಸ್ವಾಗತವನ್ನು ಕೋರುತ್ತಾ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ವಿವರ ನೀಡಲು ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಡುವಂತಹ ಈ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನು ಕಿರು ಆಗಿ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡಲು ನಾನೀಗ ಶ್ರೀಯುತ ನವೀನ್ ಹೆಗ್ಡೆ ಅವರನ್ನು ಕೇಳಿಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ.
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ, ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ನವೀನ್ ಹೆಗ್ಡೆ. ಈಗ ನಾನು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟರ್ಸ್ನ ನಾನು ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡ್ತೇನೆ.
ನವೀನ್ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಅನ್ನ ಸ್ವಾಪ್ ಮಾಡು, ಅದು ನೋಟ್ ಮತ್ತೆ
ಸರಿ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ?
ಸರಿ ಆಯ್ತು.
ಸೊ ಮೊದಲನೇ ಸ್ಪೀಕರ್ ರಾಜೇಶ್ ಹೆಗ್ಡೆ ಅಂತ. ಕೆನಡಾಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊಸೊಬ್ಬರು, ಆದರೆ ಬಹಳ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಇವರು ಹಳೆ ಪರಿಚಯ. ರಾಜೇಶ್ ಹೆಗ್ಡೆ ಅವರು ತಮ್ಮನ್ನು ತಾವು ಅಮೆಚ್ಯೂರ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ ಅಂತ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಆದರೆ ಅವರ ಫೋಟೋಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅವರು ಅಮೆಚ್ಯೂರ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋದು ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸ್ ಅನುಭವ ಇರತಕ್ಕಂತಹ ಛಾಯಾಚಿತ್ರ ಗ್ರಾಹಕರು ರಾಜೇಶ್ ಹೆಗ್ಡೆ. He has participated and won number of awards and recognitions in international photography salon competitions internationally. That's in countries like India, UK, Greece, Singapore, Hungary, Ireland. ಇಂಥಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ ಕಾಂಪಿಟೇಷನ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿ ಅವರು ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಪಡೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಪ್ರಶಸ್ತಿಗಳನ್ನ ಪಡೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇವರ ಫೋಟೋಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡೋದಿದ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲೊಂದು URL ಇದೆ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು URL ನಾನು ಆಮೇಲೆ ಝೂಮ್ ಚಾಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಕಾಮೆಂಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಪೇಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. ನೀವು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಅವರ ಕೆಲಸ ಯಾವ ತರ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಅವರು ಇಂಟ್ರಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಬೇಸಿಕ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತನಾಡಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಂತರ ಮಾತನಾಡಿರುವವರು ಸುಧೀರ್ ಹೆಗ್ಡೆ. ಸುಧೀರ್ ಹೆಗ್ಡೆ ಅವರು ಈಸ್ ಅ ಅಮೆಚ್ಯೂರ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ ವಿತ್ ಪ್ಯಾಷನ್ ಟು ಕ್ಯಾಪ್ಚರ್ ಪರ್ಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮೊಮೆಂಟ್ ಇನ್ ಅ ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್. ಇವರು ಟೊರೊಂಟೊದಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ರಾಂಪ್ಟನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ವಾಸವಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. He has been into photography for several years. He started with role-based point and shoot camera. ನಮಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಇದು ಹೇಗಿತ್ತು ಅನ್ನೋದೇ ಮರ್ತೋಗಿದೆ, role-based point and shoot camera. But he graduated to digital SLR. ಇವರು ಪ್ರೈಮರ್ಲಿ ನೇಚರ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫರು. ಬ್ಯೂಟಿ ಆಫ್ ನೇಚರ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ಸ್ ಹಿಮ್ ಟು ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಅನ್ಫರ್ಗೆಟಬಲ್ ಮೆಮೊರಿ ಇನ್ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಫೋಟೋಸ್. ಸೊ ಇವರು ಟೈಪ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತನಾಡಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಕೊಡಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮೂರನೆಯ ಸ್ಪೀಕರ್ ಆಗಿ ಅನೂಪ್ ಶ್ರೀಧರ. ಇವರು ಶಿವಮೊಗ್ಗದವರು, ಸದ್ಯ ಟೊರೊಂಟೊದಲ್ಲಿ ವಾಸವಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇವರು ಪ್ರೊಫೆಷನಲ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್. He introduces himself as multi-genre photographer with special interest in landscape and nature photography. His photography journey began when he borrowed a friend's camera for a trip to Sakleshpura. While all of his friends hiked, he was always at the end, stopping to savor and capture the natural beauty. Since then, photography grew from an occasional hobby into a profession. Anoop Shreedhara ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಬಿಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಹಿಸ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಇನ್ಕ್ಲೂಡ್ಸ್ ಈವೆಂಟ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ. ಬಹುಶಃ ಎನಿ ಆಫ್ ಯು ನೀವು HAA ಕನ್ವೆನ್ಷನ್ಗೆ ಟೊರೊಂಟೊಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋದ ವರ್ಷ ಆಚೆ ವರ್ಷ ಬಂದಿದ್ರೆ ಇವರು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮೇನ್ ಈವೆಂಟ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫರ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರು. And he also does landscape and cityscape photography, to name a few. Currently, he runs a freelance photography business in Canada under the name Frozen Frames Photography. ನೀವು www.frozenframes.ca ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಹೋದರೆ ನೀವು ಅವರ ಕೆಲವು ವರ್ಕ್ ಸ್ಯಾಂಪಲ್ನ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಅವರ ಕಾಂಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಸಹಿತ ಅಲ್ಲಿದೆ. ಅನೂಪ್ ಶ್ರೀಧರ್ ಅವರು ಇಂಡೋರ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಈವೆಂಟ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ ಟಿಪ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಗುಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸಸ್ ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತನಾಡಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಂತರ ಅನಂತ ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಉಪಾಧ್ಯಾಯ. ಇವರು he's an amateur photographer since 2009. He began his journey like many of his generation with borrowed camera, and when an opportunity presented itself, he jumped in by investing into it. He is particularly passionate about still life photojournalism and architectural photography types, be it on DSLR or cell phone. With phones being convenient and now becoming better in taking photograph, he continues his passion with phones. In fact, ಈಗ ಒಂದು 6-7 ವರ್ಷದ ಹಿಂದೆ ನಾನು ಅನಂತನ್ ಕೇಳಿದೆ, ಅನಂತ ನನಗೊಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಶೂಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾಮ್ರಾ ತಗೊಳ್ಬೇಕು, ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಒಂದು ರೆಕಮೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡು ಅಂತ. ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಯಾಕೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ ನವೀನ್ ಅಣ್ಣ, ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕ್ಯಾಮ್ರಾ ಇರೋ ಸೆಲ್ ಫೋನ್ ತಗೊಳ್ಳಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ ಅನಂತ. ಸೊ ಹಿ ನೋಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಟಾಕಿಂಗ್ ಅಬೌಟ್. ಸೆಲ್ ಫೋನ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಅನಂತನಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ. ಹಿ ವಿಲ್ ಶೇರ್ ಅ ಫ್ಯೂ ಟಿಪ್ಸ್ that uses his knowledge in our session today. Anantha, cell phone photography, how to take better photos with a cell phone, ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತನಾಡಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಹಳ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಆಸಕ್ತಿಕರವಾದಂತಹ ವಿಚಾರ ಇದು. ಸೊ ಈ 4 ಜನ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟರ್ಸ್ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಇವತ್ತು. ಇನ್ನು ತಡ ಯಾಕೆ, ನಾವು ಈಗ ಮೊದಲನೇ ಸ್ಪೀಕರ್ ರಾಜೇಶ್ ಹೆಗ್ಡೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ನಾನು ಬಿಟ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಬಂದದ್ದು ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಸೊ ಇದು ಈಗ ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಕನ್ನಡದಿಂದ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ಗೆ ಸ್ವಿಚ್ ಆಗ್ತಾನೆ ವೈಲ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಶೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಅಪ್ ಮೈ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಶೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಮೈ ಸ್ಲೈಡ್, ರೈಟ್? ಸೊ ಲೆಟ್ ಮಿ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಡೂಯಿಂಗ್ ದ್ಯಾಟ್. ನಂದು ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದ ಎಲ್ಲಕ್ಕೂ? ಹೋಪ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ವಿಸಿಬಲ್, ರೈಟ್? Okay, this is I'm not going to introduce myself any further because the introduction is already done by Naveen. Naveen Hegde avರಿಗೆ introduction ಗೆ, Krishnaprasad ಅವರದು welcome ಗೆ thank you. So ನಾನು basics of photography or introduction to photography from a technical perspective, right? So these list what you see below in my front slide is the equipments what I have, right? So sometimes, I mean, we can take good photos with mobile, with whatever the equipment you have. But sometimes if you want to take a specific photo for a specific event and that time, then you might need a specific equipment also, right? So I'm just going to tell you the theory behind it, and you might want to decide what you want to buy and what you want to get and so on and so forth. right? So the next page where I'm just explaining on the terminology, I'm highlighting on the terminology. So we need a camera body. So if we assume a photographer as a painting, a person who paints, right? Then image sensor inside the camera body becomes his canvas, his or her canvas. Then lens becomes the brush, and then combination of these four characteristics like ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and white balance. Combination of all these becomes a paint, and then finally you use these ingredients to create your photo in whatever the genre or style you may want to create, right? So when we talk technically about photography, then these are pretty much important stuff, whether you take it from mobile, you take it from point and shoot, or SLR, or any form of camera, right? So these are there. You want it or not, in some shape and form, these are there in each of those cameras, right? Let's understand some of these points now. And I want to I'm not going to spend too much time on lens and camera body, because every camera will have a lens, every camera will have sensor. So it is up to your requirement, up to your interest, up to your passion and other things, to which one to go for. Okay, now it's a sensor size, right? So sensor size is nothing but a size of your paper or a canvas, right? When we look at this, so there are so many types of sensors or sizes of sensors. So large format sensors, which are used in Hasselblad or some other well-known, renowned cameras, which gets used for, if you have anyway anytime in any bigger cities, if you have seen a photographs of a building size, right? That is not a cell phone photography, right? That is the photos taken in these large format cameras. Otherwise, it is not easy to blow up your print to that size, say 50 feet by 60 feet or 100 feet. Right? That kind of photos are normally taken in large format cameras, because the sensor size is so big that you can blow up to pretty much any size there. Then comes the medium frame, so slightly smaller. So and then the full frame. Full frame is mostly commonly used by all the professional photographers most of the time. And you can see that on the right hand side, I have a comparison between the sizes, right? And then you have APS-C, that is cropped sensors, smaller than full frame, then 4/3, and point and shoot and mobile cameras, right? So these are the sensor sizes. And mobile cameras mostly have these three sensors, size of any of these three size sensors. The smallest to 2/3, and some cameras might even have 1-inch sensor, but majority of those will have one of these three smallest sensors. Okay, and full frame, as you see, is a 35 mm. That is the baseline normally we take, and then this APS-C becomes a crop factor, either 1.5 or 1.6, kind of a crop factor from 35 mm. This is kind of your A4 size paper or A3 size paper or A0, A1. So that kind of you can compare the sensor size to the paper size, and then you can imagine in that way. Okay.
So Rajesh, when you say all these things, it is the size of the lens, diameter of a lens. What is this different things means? 1 divided by 2/5 of an inch. It is the size of the lens or the aperture or what?
This is size of the paper, which is inside the camera. You have a sensor which captures through a lens. It captures the lights and forms the photo, right? That is sensor behind the scene,
Oh,
in the
got it.
camera, inside the camera body.
Got it.
Whatever the camera, right? Inside the camera, the sensor is situated,
Got
right?
it. Thanks.
So this is size of that sensor, which is actually is a canvas or a paper you can compare it to. Make sense?
Yes, yes.
Cool. Then going forward, so we are going to draw our pictures or the drawing on the sensor, right? Using the lens and using all other things. Now, if we look at some of the sizes of the sensor, you can see that medium format, these are all in MMs, right? So you can see that. If anybody is interested, I can share this PDF as well. If some of you are interested to or you can even Google and get this information, right? But this is size in mm, so you can see that some of these cameras APS-C are like Nikon or Pentax or Sony or those will have a 1.5 crop factor. You can see on the right hand side. So in baseline with full frame sensor. Full frame sensor is one. If you consider medium format sensor is larger than full frame. And then as you go down, APS-H, that is by Canon. Some of the model uses Canon, some of the model uses APS-H. And then you have APS-C, which is 1.5 crop factor by these providers or manufacturers. Then Canon does 1.6 crop, and then 4/3, micro third or 4/3 now, which is very famous now, right? So smaller, compact, mirrorless bodies. So that uses a crop factor of 2, and then 1 inch uses 2.72. And as the sensor goes smaller and smaller, then I probably will touch base on how does these impact, right? Once we understand those other technical terminologies, then we might want to come back and do some mapping between this and that, depending on how the clarity depends on the sensor size, right? So larger the sensor, better the picture quality. So that much we can understand right now. So now the ISO part of it. So once we understood the sensor size, now we go around the light itself, right? The ISO is the intensity of light, what is coming in. So you might have a 100-watt bulb or 200-watt bulb. So the intensity of the light is nothing but an ISO, right? Then lesser the ISO number, smoother the image, and higher the ISO number, grainy the image, right? So you can see this comparison on left and right. On the left-hand side, it is 1600 ISO, which is smoother. You can see that the texture looks much smooth. And on the right-hand side, you have a 40,000 ISO, which is texture is like too grainy. So ISO decides or defines the smoothness of the image itself, or the details of the image, what is captured in the image. So the recommended value of ISO for the most part is around 200 to 400, right? So the moment you go beyond, depending on what kind of camera you are using, some cameras can handle 800, 1600, 3200 very comfortably. And in other cameras, if you go beyond 1600 or 1800, 3200, then the photo starts getting too much of these noises, right? Your photo starts losing the quality. So the best ISO would be your 200 to 400 range. And this setting again depends on what is the lighting surrounding your photographing area, right? So that all depends on that, and also depends on other factors which we are going to talk about in the future slides.
One minute, Rajesh Anna.
Hmm.
Yes, Survana picturely, less ISO.
Correct.
But if you look into that L in this one, it is more clearer. In the
that we are going to talk about that in the other points, right? So as I said, so ಈಗ ಲೆನ್ಸ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಇದು ಬ್ರಷ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ವಾಸ್ ಆತು. ಲೈಟಿಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದೆ 4, there are 4 types of things, right, which constitutes for the paint, right? So paint ನ thickness ಬಂದಿಕ್ಕು, paint ನ concentration ಇದಕ್ಕು, and those things are decided by those other 4 factors, and ISO is one of them, right? So here it only decides on this smoothness or a graininess of the image, depending on what is the intensity of light. Then is an aperture, right? Aperture is the keyhole, size of the keyhole. If you look at your door, if it has a conventional keys where you put a key inside and open that, right? So then that is the keyhole. Size of the keyhole is ISO, right? That is the opening of this lens diaphragm. We call it as diaphragm. So, and diaphragm is normally made of some elements, and more the number of elements, it becomes makes the smoother circle of the keyhole. Lesser the elements, diaphragm elements, it becomes a hexagon or pentagon or octagon kind of a opening here, right? So aperture decides the aperture number decides the size of the opening, right, of this lens diaphragm. Okay, so now if you look at this right diagram, you have f2.8 on the left hand side, and on the far extreme on the right you have f22. That means as the aperture number goes up, the size of the opening reduces, right? Lesser the number, larger the opening, and higher the number, smaller the opening. Now, in the next picture, I kind of use the same one, but now you can see that I have first picture is with f5.6, where L is the SanDisk memory card behind is very blur, right? You cannot even read anything over that. But on the right hand side, I have aperture f18, where I can read everything on the memory card on the behind, right? And it is the same thing here also, right? Here, f value is less and f value is more, because I had to compensate about these ISO settings. So to get a right exposure on your photo, you have to make these ISO, aperture, and one other factor which we'll talk about. You have to set those things, and then compensate to each other number, and then you get a right exposure of the photo. And that's why you have this blur and clear L here. That is the impact of this aperture setting. So larger the aperture, lower the depth of field. So you might have seen some of the photos with bokeh effects, right? So front the subject in the front of the screen or the photo is very clear, and behind you can see that bokeh effect or a blurred background, and that blurred background is mostly created by this aperture value, by these openings. Okay, so then the next point is the shutter speed. So shutter speed is for what duration your shutter is open, right? We saw that this diaphragm forms those shutter kind of a thing. So this opens and closes, right? This opens and closes depending on your f value, and then for how long that is open. All right, for how long that is open is sorry, here, for how long the shutter is open is decided by shutter speed. And shutter speed in most of the cameras varies from 30 second to max of 1 by 800 second, right? 1 by 800 second. You can think of 8,000th piece of a second, right? That is the shutter speed we are talking about, right? And some cameras also have a bulb mode, where you can keep your shutter open for, say, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or 60 minutes, or an hour, depending on your battery life. You can even keep it open for longer duration also with a bulb mode, right? So for example, if you want to take a star trail, right, in the night sky, if you want to capture a moving stars trail in a circular line or a straight line, then you might want to keep this shutter open for 60 minutes, right? click a uh, Click a button of a camera and then keep it open, so it just be open until you release it, right? So that is shutter speed. And depending on the shutter speed, you can see this example below. So the first one is 1 by 2000 second, where the rotating fins are frozen here, right? And with a shutter speed 1 over 200, you can see that there is a slight blur. So it's a motion blur. So you can see that it's slightly blurred. And with 1 by 8 second, then you cannot even see the blade, right? The blade is, you can see the moment here, you can feel the movement of the blade, that it's being rotated, right? So now you can think that, okay, shutter speed, if somebody is running and if you want to freeze that person in your photo or in your frame, then you need higher shutter speed to freeze that person, or maybe flowing river or a waterfall or something of that sort. If you want to freeze that, you need a higher shutter speed. If you want to get a silky effect of the waterfall, then you need to reduce your shutter speed, right? And when you reduce your shutter speed, you need the camera to be mounted on a tripod. If you hold it in a hand, then your handshake will transfer to the photo, and photo becomes blurry, more blurry. It introduces, say for example, now if I hold it in my hand and take this photo, even this outer frame of the fan would also be seen as blurred. That becomes a shape, right? So the moment you have a lower shutter speed pictures, then you'll be required to have that mounted on a tripod. So these are three major factors in the camera which decides the the clarity of the photo, quality of the photo, and other things, and then what you exactly want to capture there, right? Moving objects or a still object, or light trails, or if car is flowing, car is going on a road, and then if you want to capture that as a movement, then you reduce your shutter speed and then capture those. And the moment you reduce your shutter speed, then you have to compensate with you know varying your aperture and varying your ISO. So you cannot just increase or decrease one value. You have to increase or decrease all these three to get a perfect composition, perfect exposure of your photos. And when you shoot everything in auto mode of your camera automatically adjusts all these things for you. And if you want to shoot the photos in manual mode, then you are adjusting all the three values in your camera. And depending on the camera, the brand and the model, you will have this ability to adjust these manually. Okay, then comes the white balance. White balance is the shade of the light, right? If you have a white light or a red light or any other color of the light, then depending on this white balance, so you see in your bare eyes, you see as some shade of the light. But in the camera, when you capture it, depending on the white balance setting, the light can be bluish, or light can be slightly red, right? Depending on this setting. Now, when you keep it auto white balance setting in the camera, then camera decides of what kind of white balance I have to set, right? But you can also set it to the custom mode, where you can select daylight setting or indoor or cloudy or something of that sort. Then automatically camera adjusts the temperature of the light, and then it adjusts the shade of the light, right? Whether it has to be blue or it needs to be red. So in the next example, you will see that the white balance effect, right? The first one, it has 3950 degree Kelvin temperature, which is bluish of the photo. Then this is 5000, which is normal view, right? When we see with the bare eyes, this is what you normally see. But on the right hand side, you have 6900 temperature, then it is totally red, right? So if the white balance is not proper, for example, if somebody is smiling and you take a photo, the teeth might look blue or look red if the white balance setting is not proper, right? So it is the white balance which decides on the color tone of the photo. So these are the four factors which makes the paint, the color of the paint, or the concentration of the paint, or the thickness of the paint, and so on and so forth. All right. Now, going forward with the lenses, so we said in the beginning of the session that the lens is nothing but a paint brush. So we understood about the paint. We understood about the canvas, which is nothing but a sensor. Now, from the lens perspective, you have different kinds of lenses depending on what you want to do or what you want to shoot, right? So in the point and shoot cameras and mobile cameras, you do not have a choice there. The lens is fixed, and you just will be varying depending on the zoom capability and other things. You'll just be able to either optical zoom or a digital zoom. But when it comes to a SLR, right, or a mirrorless, where you have a lens replaceable, you can remove one lens and put the other lens. Then you have all these options available for you. And in the lenses, we have different types, which are prime lenses, which is fixed focal length, right, with 14 mm or 50 mm or 100 or 400 and so on and so forth. There are so many prime lenses. And then you have wide zoom lens, where you have 18 to 55 or 18 135. These are all MMs, okay, focal length. And then you have ultra wide zoom lenses, like it's going to do a wider coverage, like 10 mm or 1022 or 1122, 28 or 1530, and so on and so forth. Then you have telephoto zoom for a longer zoom lens, which could be 55, 255 or 7200 or 7300 and so on and so forth. So I can show you one example for that zoom lens. So you can see this. This is a zoom lens, one of the zoom lens I have. So you can see that here, right? So this zoom lens is 100/400 zoom lens, right? So you can actually take a object which is farther from you and then easily take the photo from this lens. Okay, then you have a macro lens which is used for insects or the flower photography or food photography or portraits and things like that. You have macro lenses as well. Then you have tilt and shift lens. This is a special purpose lens for architecture photography. So for the buildings and external architecture things and internal to get the lines parallel and so on. That is tilt and shift lens. Then you have some teleconverters to make this lens the focal length multiplier, right? You have 1.4x or 2x. Then you have mount converters. For example, if you have Canon lenses, but if you have Nikon body, or if you have Sony lenses, if you have Canon body, and vice versa, then you can buy those converters. Then you can use Canon lens on Sony body or Sony lenses on Canon body, and so on and so forth. So using these converters. Then you also have extension tubes. That is mostly used for extreme macro work. So that gets a small piece of tube gets attached to your lens backside of the lens and gets mounted on the body. So that is an extension tube. So these are some of the things about the lenses. And any questions on technically on any of these things? Maybe these things might have gone over our head, but then important thing is whether you know that what kind of settings you are using while taking a photo or not. These are applied onto your photo, right? So these points are applied on your photo: ISO, aperture, shutter speed, white balance. These are automatically or manually applied onto your photo to make it look good or look bad. Then finally, the genre or a style of the photography. There are lots of namings around these photos, like pictorial. Pictorial is something which tells you the story in the photo, right? Say for example, if somebody is playing and that photo tells the story of a small kid playing and things like that. A portrait is a facial normally, right? Then candid is just like whoever is doing something and you take a photo without they knowing about it, right? That becomes a candid or a street photography. Then you have a landscape, then nature for journalism, aerial. All these nowadays you have lots of drones doing aerial photography. Then product photography. If I want to sell some product which I produce or market, then I can do some product photography. Then architecture, black and white, and flash photography, and so on and so forth. There are lots of types of photography, and I invite Sudheer to talk about these styles or types of photography in the next session. Is there any question before we go there, or we can wait for end of the session and we can start taking the questions?
Yeah. We can wait until the end of the session to take the questions. If you have any questions, you Zoom nalliroru, you can just type your question into the Zoom chat box. YouTube nalliroru YouTube comment box ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿ ಮಾನಿಟರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. We will answer it as we go along, or they will answer it at the end. And this YouTube nalliroರಿಗೆ even moderators can ask the questions on behalf of you if you type it in, or you can ask it in the end live. Thank you. We'll move on to Sudheer Hegde.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Naveen. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ?
Yes, Sudheer, please.
Okay, thank you. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. Hope everybody is doing good and keeping safe. So I'm going to share my screen. So Rajesh has already touched base on the technical aspect of the camera and photography. So I will go through, my topic is to explain about the types of photography. So first of all, what is photography? How do you define the photography, right? So the photography can be defined as an art created by the light. So basically, you manipulate the light coming into the camera to create different types of photography. So as Rajesh mentioned, there are three aspects in the photography. That's ISO, aperture, speed, and then the camera, this one, what is called the camera, focal length. The how much the aperture is going to be opened, right? So coming to the basic of the photography, so there are three types of photography which has created when the camera came out many years back. That's portrait, landscape, and documentary. So a portrait photography is the very basic one, which has started a very long time back. And the first photographer who has taken the portrait photography is called Robert Cornelius. So he took it around 1839. So, and you guys know that there is something called selfie these days, which is kind of portrait photography. And the portrait photography is basically taken to capture an individual, usually in a closer screen. So portrait photography usually takes the speed of ISO between 100 and 400, and shutter speed will be 200 of a second. And aperture size need to be between 2.8 and 5.6. As Rajesh mentioned, that aperture size, as it goes, the number goes up, it opens smaller size. So basically, if you can consider a cup of tea, so if you say half of the tea means one second of the tea means it is half full. That means you have more amount of tea in a cup, right? If you say 1/20th of it, but that means you have smaller amount of tea. That means that you're opening the aperture size in a smaller this one keyhole. So portrait photography usually most of the people takes in autofocus. So it does pretty much good job taking in autofocus. And the next one, what we have is a landscape. So landscape, as the name mentioned, it's basically taken in outdoor. You can say it is a art of capturing the picture of a nature in an outdoor to bring it into the scene. So landscape photography is usually shows a little bit, no human activities. Instead of is featuring on the subject like a landform, weather, it's like a mountain, ambient light, those kind of stuff. And the landscape photos are taken in a low speed, like a ISO 100, and shutter speed of 1/10 of a second, and aperture size of 8. Generally, when you set the landscape in a camera, it'll be without flash. And if you're taking outdoor, so it's recommended to use a lens hood, so to avoid the direct sun rays on the lens of the camera. Okay, this is one of the photograph taken in the landscape mode. It's basically taken outside, as you see, in a field in a landscape mode. The last one in basic type of photography is the documentary. So basically, documentary photography is it's basically taken to to represent a or to tell the story of a people or places, and it is usually it'll be narrating a story through that photography. And you could say that the wedding photography is a form of documentary photography, and usually done by professional using the um, professional cameras. So all these three types of photography is a basic photography, which is there for a long time. So as the new type of digital cameras evolve, there are different type of photographies has coming, where you can take it. You can take the photos in a different styles. So one of them is a close-up photography. So usually it's uh, the the photo is taken very close to the object, or it is zoomed to very close to the object. And it is usually a single object photography is taken. As you see, this photography is taken in a close, and then the background is blurred. So that means that it is the focal length is large. So that's the reason the back one is being blurred. So as Rajesh mentioned, that technical aspect of how that is being blurred. So, and then close-up photography gives more detail about the object. Even human eyes cannot see, and so that you can get that much close detail in the close-up photography. So photos are shot in close object to either the photo telephoto lenses or zoom lenses, and the lens with the shorter focal length, as I mentioned, is preferred for the close-up photography. And it is tripod may be required if you are taking close photography to avoid shake during the close-up shots. And since it is taken in a close-up, so the flashes are need to be avoided so that there is no blurring of the light. This is another photo which is taken in a close-up style. The next one, what we have is the sports photography. The sports photography is basically captured to the image of a moving object. So since the object is moving in a high speed, so the speed of the shutter needs to be in a very high speed. If that is not the case, so object can get blurred. So usually the speed of the shutter will be 1/500th of a second or more, and the aperture will be a large, like a 2.8, so that the object will be focused. Usually the flash cannot, actually you cannot use the flash in a sports photography because the flash, the light the speed of the light may not be enough to capture to align with the speed of the shutter. And it is preferred to have the multiple exposure or burst mode so that you can capture the moment of the object or moment what you want to capture, so that you don't miss out the moment. The camera at least need to be 200 millimeter zoom lens to have the good photography in a sports style. This is one of the photos we had taken it. So this is taken in a sports photography mode. The other photography I would like to mention about sunset. So in sunset, the shutter speed is kept as low as 1/30th of a second, or longer aperture to set the low, and smaller aperture as long as 1/16th of a second. So Since it is the low speed, so shutter, the tripod is required or it is preferred so that there is no shake while taking the photo. The sunset preserves the sunset settings rather preserves the deep hue seen in the sunset or sunrises. Limit the shot to single shot. So multiple or bus mode is not recommended. Auto flash will be disabled when you set it. And then disable the auto white mode as well, so that you can capture the actual warm golden tone of the sunrise or sunset. So there are other types. There are about 50 types of different form of photographies. So I have mentioned some of them here, like a candlelight photography, blossom, food photography, fashion, architectural, wedding, and other. There are a lot of them. As I mentioned, there are 50 of them, and each type of photography can be a professional for any individual who would like to pursue the photography as their profession. So this is, I mean, it depends on the type of photography people want to take it, and the camera they need to select, and then they can get a better photographies. That's all from my side. So if any question or anything you guys have, let me know. Okay, Naveen, that's it from my side.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to Anoop Shreedhara.
Thanks, Naveen. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಕೇಳುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ ವಾಯ್ಸ್.
ಹೌದು, ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
Okay. I'll just share my screen. ಒಂದು ನಿಮಿಷ. ನನ್ನ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ಹೌದು, ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಲ್, ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಅನೂಪ್ ಶ್ರೀಧರ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು, ನಾನು ಟೊರೊಂಟೊದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀನಿ. First of all, giving this opportunity to me to showcase my work, I really thank CHAA. So as I was thinking, without audience, art is nothing. So, this is the good opportunity for people like us to share our work. So I really thank everyone involved. I'll try to speak in both English and Kannada. So, some of these are my photographs, and today I'll be speaking a bit about indoor and event photography, as well as some tips and tricks for a good, capturing good photographs. So, indoor and event photography, this is an experience I've had, especially in Toronto, Canada, 2 years ago. So, I have done a few events illi, and I've learned over time, and I'll try to share all that I've learned. So, let's start with what is indoor and event photography, right? So Salpa, I think previous speakers, they touched upon it. So indoor photography is mainly, it relates to photographing subjects indoors, as it's quite evident. So for example, a convention halls, office spaces, or even your own home, you might have some small, birthday party or something. And event photography also is somewhat similar, but it could be indoor or outdoor. So event photography will cover a wide range, like your weddings, corporate events, even I did a movie opening on Hegde. So there are so many genre that comes under event photography. So that could be both indoor and outdoor, like weddings could happen outdoor as well. So that is a basic idea of what indoor and event photography is about. So I just want to show some of the examples here. So like the ones here on the left was an indoor. It was mostly a corporate tech event. The one in the middle, as most of us can connect to, idu Haveka convention ಆಗಿತ್ತು 2019 ಅಲ್ಲಿ. So I had the wonderful opportunity to capture these beautiful images and these moments. And some of these on the right are some of the work I did with my clients. So this is more of, this could be also events where it's maternity photo shoot agli athwa bere baby shoots or something like that. So these are all some examples of indoor and event photography. Coming to tools and equipments, Nano, I'll try to speak to what I use, but there are so many things that you could use. There, ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ, photography field itself is reinvented every time there is something that's coming new. Like as you see, your camera, your phone has such like amazing technology embedded. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈಗ ಮುಂಚೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಲೆನ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಅಷ್ಟು ಇರ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಫೋನಲ್ಲಿ, ಬಟ್ ಈಗ ಮಲ್ಟಿಪಲ್ ಲೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಹಾಕ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, which will allow you to take, like as Rajesh was pointing out, to depth of field. Andre, like, something near as well as something far could be both be in focus. Athara, it's such powerful. Jotege you can also take like really, long exposure images agli ಅಥವಾ wide angle images agli. So athara reinvent ಆಗ್ತಾ ತುಂಬಾ tools and equipments ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, and it's tough to keep up. But it doesn't mean that, buying all the new tools and technologies, it doesn't make someone a good photographer. So you still have to learn the basics. Even if you have a very old set of gadgets, you can still take a wonderful set of photos. There are some tips and tricks I'll try to cover down the line. So coming to tools and equipments, nanatra camera body iradu Canon EOS, actually EOS 6D anta. So that is a full frame sensor, and I decided to buy this because I think Rajesh pointed this out a bit earlier. Full frame sensor andre, you have a larger canvas, so you can capture more light, more content. So adinda full frame sensor is advantageous. It could also be andre, it doesn't mean that that's the one you go to. It really depends on your need. Camera lens bandu nanatra, I have a 24mm wide angle. So normally this is a trick where you have a shorter value of the focal length, like 24mm, which means it's wider. So what it basically is the distance between your lens and then I think it's the sensor, a part of the camera body. So our distance mele adu 24mm agli 700mm atara adu hogta hogutte. So the shorter it is, the wider the image can be taken. So 24mm is a wide angle lens. 70 to 200 is a varying, which means the lens moves where, it can either be 70 or it can be like 200, which is more focused. And you can zoom in and you can take a image. Like for example, wildlife photography, they use 400, 600, even 800mm lenses. But this is what I have is 70 to 200, which can be used for mostly for weddings, rarely for wildlife, but mostly weddings. 50mm prime lens is there, which is a fixed. It's called a fixed focal length because it's 50mm. It doesn't vary, so that's why it's called a prime lens. So idana portraits, when you take like images for individuals, like a fashion photography atadi kuda use ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. And the general concept is, the more things move inside a lens, you should have a really good quality lens if you want a quality photo, because ಜಾಸ್ತಿ movement ಆದಷ್ಟು ಒಳಗಡೆ the quality can reduce. So if you get a cheap, you can get a I think you have a 200 to 600, which is a huge range. You can get that lens because you think, oh, that gives such versatility, but that could be a lower quality one, and because there is so much movement, the quality reduce ago chances irutte. So you might not get sharper photos. It might be blurry. So you try to keep all these things in mind when you buy like lens or even camera body. Munde, coming to flash, I have this flash mount that I use. So especially the indoor photography, kind of flash is mostly needed. Especially I'll touch upon challenges later, but variance in light irutte, low light irutte. So flash is a must. I'll try to explain how to use the flash. And then I use a tripod in most cases. It is not necessary in each case, but like tripod on events ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ತಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, if you want consistent photos, like hand holding it with 70 to 200, which is a heavy lens, it's difficult, and it also like shake our chances kuda irutte. So you try to use a tripod to just mount it and keep it in one place. But the downside is tripod enagutte, it's generally is heavy. and you have to have that extra thing you carry around everywhere. So it has its own pros and cons. And one of the most important things is you always have extra set of batteries and memory cards, especially in events. Like, you go to an event where, let's say they're paying you as well. So if a battery hoito or memory card hoito, you know what's going to happen. You will not be able to continue, which is the worst case scenario. So always have those as extra, like buffer type it called. So these are the tools that I normally use, especially with respect to indoor and event photography. So indoor photography and both event photography has its own set of challenges. I mean, every type of photography has challenges. With respect to indoor and event, like the one of the most important challenge or most challenging aspect I've seen is varying lighting. Andre, you can say maneg hogbit yardar maneg hogi or taking photos andaga, you might have an incandescent bulb somewhere, you might have a fluorescent bulb somewhere else, or you might have very varying, like disproportionate lighting irutte. So that's a very, it's a tough challenge that photographers face. And the other thing is like freezing moments in low light conditions. So especially indoor nalli, este light idrunu generally, unless it's a very big arena where, it's top quality, light tumba dim irutte. So for that, you would normally have to have a good camera, which is fast. So fast meaning it higher ISO hodastu, like Rajesh was telling, higher ISO hodastu, it becomes more sensitive to light. So you can go to higher ISO, but you will start getting noise as well. And there's put a dust or anything, any noise that is also captured and that shows up in the image, which makes it of less quality. So Adrinda, you will get cameras which even at higher ISO will perform really good. So ISO, like apart from 200 to 400, which is a good ISO range, even if you go to 1600, 3200, a double aagta hogate, you will still end up getting good images. So for that, you'll have to pay because it's a better camera in a way. Varying needs irutte. So this is something I've seen in the recent events where when the event hodaga, especially if you're a single photographer, you have to cover somewhere, you have to cover portraits, families athwa individuals agli. You have to come back and cover stage like performances and events. You also have to cover multiple things happening in that event. Like one place you could have something else like backstage front stage. So all these are different things that you have to handle as a photographer. So sometimes it comes by experience. The advantages of indoor and event is mostly where you can actually pre-plan. Andre munchane you go to that spot, you kind of figure out how is the lighting and plan accordingly. Under lighting kammi idre athwa lighting change madslik adre, you can actually try to get that done. So it suits to take good photos. And also relatively controlled environment. Andre because you're indoor, most probably you won't have you won't have to face natural conditions like when you're out in the nature, anything can happen. Like male barbodu athwa suddenly bright sunlight irbodu. But that part is taken away when it's indoor and event photography. I mean, especially indoor photography. So that is an advantage. So I wanted to explain tips as part of the indoor and event photography, but I'll cover it on my next topic, which is general tips and tricks. One of the most important thing I've seen is to know your equipment, whatever you have. Like even if you have a phone and if you're really interested in photography, you can take good images, but just try to understand what does that phone camera offer. If you have a point and shoot, understand what does it offer. So as much as you can understand it, you will be able to take better photos. So that's one of the key aspects that you need to understand. The other part is research and plan ಮಾಡೋದು important, especially if you are serious about taking a particular type of photograph of a particular location. You have to research. So one thing that I do is, for example, if a fall season is there, if I have to go to a particular spot, and if I'm looking for fall photography, I see Instagram and see how people have posted the photos, how is that location. And when I'm actually, let's say I'm planning to go on a Sunday, I see how's the weather on Sunday. So idella aspects na nodkondu, then you think of, male baro chances idre, do you want something to cover your camera, or does it make sense to go then? So it all depends on what is your goal. like, so you research with location, timings, restrictions as well, because tumba sala ನಾನು ಫೇಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ where you go to a place and like for example ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಡೌನ್ಟೌನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಸಬ್ವೇನಲ್ಲಿ ತೆಗಿತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ and I was not breaking any rules, but they were not so comfortable with me being there. So ಈ ತರ ಎಲ್ಲ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So these are some of the things that you keep in mind. Like, you are aware of most of the things. There are some things that could go that is not in your control, but generally be aware of that location, restrictions, timings, and all that. And this is something I've seen where you plan for the expected. Like, you expect fall colors, for example. You plan for all that. You go there, but for some reason you don't get it. Andre bere yaro post ಮಾಡಿರೋದ ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಗೋದಲ್ಲ. I mean, you would see really good photos ಅದನ್ನ post process ಮಾಡಿ ತುಂಬಾನೇ bright ಆಗಿ ತೋರಿಸಿರಬಹುದು, but ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋದಾಗ you might be disappointed. So my thought process is, even if I go expecting something, I will still be ready to plan to get something unexpected. For example, I would probably get a really good foggy setup irbodu, or I would get a sunset or something like that. So just be ready for it mentally. I'm sure when you carry all the stuff you have, you will have everything that you need there, but it's mental preparation that that will help you. So these are some of the theoretical tips and tricks. So I'll give some examples. So let's see. So there are certain things that we follow, but again, this is not something that is it's a guideline. It's not a rule, I would say. So you can break it or you can follow it depending on what you want to show. So for example, rule of third anta ಒಂದು rule ಇದೆ. So rule of third ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ, whenever you have a photo, like imagine you have this blank canvas, draw 2 lines horizontally, 2 lines vertically. I mean, I said the other way, but you'll get those 4 points. So our 4 points are like the points of interest. So ಈಗ ನೀವು ಏನೇ ಸಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ತಗೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಗಲೂ, even portrait photography ನಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ, keeping someone in the middle and taking a photo, and try to keep them on one of these points, and then try to take a photo and see the difference. ಈಗ ಈ image ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ, like this being in the middle and being here, it makes a lot of difference. ಇದು generally ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ eye it tends to see these points of interest first. So keeping that subject, whichever is a subject, right there, it really helps to make it a better photo. It's more about composition ಕಡೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಇದು. So that's a rule of third ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. So dividing the image into 3 groups, horizontally and vertically. So these are some of the examples. These are the images I took when I went to Banff and Jasper with my wife. So it doesn't mean like ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಈ image ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ನಿಮಗೆ, what I really liked is this section here, and then something happening here in these mountains. So I wanted to kind of divide the image in such a way that the below part is covered kind of 1/3, and then this contrasting green, and then you have this mountain. Something similar here. Image alli, like what I'm trying to do is guide the user, guide the viewer in such a way that this rock illi ideyalla, idu anchor tara act agate, and then you kind of see through and see, you explore the image further. So this I'm trying to keep it in the point of interest, as I explained, like you divide the image and keep it in the point of interest. So atara. The other part is, this is a bit about indoor photography. ಈಗ soft light and light bouncing ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾನು ಜನರಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. This is a general issue that I've seen, especially with ಈಗ phone ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮ್ದು flash is directly facing someone when you're taking the image ಅಲ್ಲ. But I would not speak about phone, but generally speaking, ಈಗ if you're using a flash, ಇಲ್ಲೊಂದು image example ಇದೆ. If you point the flash at someone's face and take the image, flat agogutte, because so much of light is like hitting on the subject, everything becomes flat out. So always you try to get a soft exposure. So meaning ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ದಂಗೆ flash anna you can always point up ceiling ಗೆ. So eventually, if the ceiling is not too high and not too dark, you can use this method where you can actually bounce the light. So light ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, it will hit the top and then it will come down at an angle. So this ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ತಿರೋ ಹಾಗೆ, the angle that you put the flash in, it really changes the way the light hits the subject. So you can always play around with that, and I always use this, and this is a very general, it's an important tip that is always given, especially indoors ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ. with respect to someone taking an image, ಈಗ ನೀವು ಸ್ಟೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಪರ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ and you are trying to take an image, if you switch on the flash, it is not going to help at all. It will actually ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬ್ಯಾಟ್ರಿ ಹೋಗುತ್ತಷ್ಟೇ. So I would suggest not switching on the flash unless it's too dark over there. But again, dark bandaglu ನೀವು flash hakadre, it doesn't look good. You would have seen those images. So adrinda, if you have a good camera where you can change the angle of the flash, you can actually bounce it. Adu tumba chanage, like the image down below shows that difference. So it's basically soft exposure on the right side, you can see here. And the third one is the ISO power. So iga eston janake camera ide, but then you don't know how to use it, especially when you're indoors. Low light irodrinda, you try to make use of your ISO to the extent you can. If you have a good camera that supports, like, you know, a good quality up to a particular ISO, try to keep increasing the ISO, and you know, you will get other benefits. Because ISO ನೀವು ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ನೀವು ಶಟರ್ ಸ್ಪೀಡ್ನ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಶಟರ್ ಸ್ಪೀಡ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಯು ವಿಲ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಶಾರ್ಪರ್ ಇಮೇಜಸ್. ಸೊ ಶಟರ್ ಸ್ಪೀಡ್ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಇದ್ರೆ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಯು ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಕ್ಯಾಪ್ಚರ್ ಮೋರ್ ಲೈಟ್, ಯು ನಾರ್ಮಲಿ ಕೀಪ್ ದ ಶಟರ್ ಸ್ಪೀಡ್ ಲೋ. ಅದಿಟ್ಟಾಗ ಡಿಸ್ಅಡ್ವಾಂಟೇಜ್ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ, ಇಫ್ ಸಂಬಡಿ ಇಸ್ ಡ್ಯಾನ್ಸಿಂಗ್, you won't get that sharp image, you will get a blurry image. So as I think Rajesh also mentioned, ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, all three things are adanna exposure triangle anta heltare. It all is relative, so you always play around with all three things. So moving on, tips and tricks, I just want to cover a few other things. So iga this was an image which I took from a vantage point, ಮೇಲ್ಗಡೆಯಿಂದ ತೆಗೆದಿದ್ದು. I had a 70-200 mm, and this is the advantage that you get out of that lens. So ಈಗ ಏನಾಯ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, if you see the image on the right, it's that kind of the wide angle, you know, view, landscape view. But with 70-200, I could zoom in and I could compose it differently. So if you see on the second image here, I kind of zoomed in a little bit and composed that image slightly differently. And the third one is because I love these fall colors, the aspen trees, I think. I wanted to take only that. So this is something that you could also play around. Nimatra yenu gadget ida, whatever lens you have, try to make use of that and see how you can differently compose the images. So I think that's pretty much I have. So nanu actually I'm on Instagram and I'm on FB as well, under Frozen Frames Photography. It should be frozen here. And my website is frozenframes.ca anbitu. And as I think Naveen pointed out, nanu illi events cover martini. I also do like maternity photo shoots and like birthday parties and all that. But I also enjoy landscape, cityscape, tumba enjoy martini. And like one example is right there, which is actually a Nathan Phillips Square that I recently took. But again, I thank the opportunity, and I think I'll pass on to Anantha for the last part of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anoop. So just give me 1 second. Okay. Namaskara. Thank you for coming, Elrigu. So naan munche DSLR use marta idde. So I'm a Nikon guy. If it interests you. So ultimately I transitioned to cell phones because adu namige carry madlike tumba sulabha aglike shuru aitu. Illadre ನೀವು ನೋಡಿದ್ರ, it's very tough to keep up with all the equipments, especially ಈಗ ನಾವು ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ಗೆ ಹೋದ್ವಿ, it's too much. So when I transitioned, ನಾನು cell phone ಹೋಗುವಾಗ I pretty much used the same philosophy that I used in DSLR. One of the key thing ಈ ಟಾಕಿಗೆ ಪ್ರಿಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಒಂದು ನಂದೊಂದು ಜರ್ನಿ ಟೈಪ್ ಅಂತ ಇದಾಯ್ತು. So I felt I could summarize a lot, so I could share this with you. So today in my talk, I'm first to camera setting in the start ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ, then the fact that we will be shooting, and then basic editing. If you are advanced, then we'll take full control what you would need, and then what you need to watch out for, and hopefully you would enjoy just as much as I do. So any camera, when you get any phone, and you want to use it as a camera, the first ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು settings by default ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಕೆಲವು ಆನ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಕೆಲವು ಡಿಸೇಬಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. So one of the key things that I do is grid enable ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. So ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಕೆಲವು settings ನಾನು ಮಾರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೆ. So I make sure ಗ್ರಿಡ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸ್ಮಾರ್ಟ್ HDR ಎನೇಬಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ. ಗ್ರಿಡ್ ಮಾಡಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅನೂಪ್ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗೆ ರೂಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಥರ್ಡ್ ಗ್ರಿಡ್ ಕಾಣ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರು ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಕ್ಯಾಮರಾದಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಯೂಸ್ ದಟ್ ಟು ಕಂಪೋಸ್. ಪ್ರಿಸರ್ವ್ ಸೆಟ್ಟಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದು ಅಪಾಲಜೈಸ್. ಸೊ ಲಾಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದೀಸ್ ಆರ್ ಬೇಸ್ಡ್ ಆಫ್ iPhone. ಸೊ ಇನ್ ಕೇಸ್ ಇಫ್ ಐ ಮಿಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಆಂಡ್ರಾಯ್ಡ್ ಐ ಡು ಅಪಾಲಜೈಸ್. So preserve settings ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ when you are shooting in a certain settings and when you exit out and when you come back, ಆವಾಗ ನೀವು ಸೆಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರೋದು ಅದು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸೆಟ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಇಲ್ಲ ಇದು ನೀವು ಡಿಸೇಬಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಆ ಸೆಟ್ಟಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ವಾಪಸ್ ರೀಸೆಟ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. Sometimes it makes sense, certain times it doesn't make sense. So this is entirely individual based. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಿಫರೆನ್ಸ್ ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡು. So the grid matte smart HDR is something that I always enable. It really helps. The next one is point and shoot. So basically you camera open madi setting alli enable madidra, now what? Now start shooting anything. So first nan shoot maduvaga nan enta keltane, what am I trying to capture? Am I trying to capture ಈಗ ಒಂದು for example function ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಯಕ್ಷಗಾನ function ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. Am I trying to capture a still, or am I trying to capture the yakshagana action? What am I trying to capture? Anta nanu I always constantly ask, and this sort of helps me to compose an image. Let's say idu nan picture alla, just disclosure. One example torsake, ee image alli using the grid lines, when you are pointing and camera dalli enable madirtira, so grid line torsutte, you can use that to position your subject based on the points where you want it to be and what else you want to show. Iga story versus image ವಿಷಯ ಬರುವಾಗ ನಾವು ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ, ಈಗ ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಯಕ್ಷಗಾನಲ್ಲಿ ತೆಗೆಯುವಾಗ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, and I am equally guilty of this as well, is that now hige photo tegdu we end up focusing only on the stage or the actor, and of course hinnela sa just on that. Usually nanu nan suggestion enta andre, just come back a little bit, zoom out athwa ನೀವು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹಿಂದ್ಗಡೆ ಬಂದ್ರೆ audience sa background ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವ ಹಾಗೆ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ, now you are capturing the action of yakshagana. ಅವರು ಯಾರೋ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, so you are now conveying a story. So this is where nanu what are you trying to capture anta nanu a question kelike suggest ಮಾಡಿರೋದು. This begins our story and composition ultimately. So ಇದೊಂದು ಎರಡು ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಆಗಿ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ, these are my photographs. I shot it on iPhone. Left side ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದು is the constant, is the typical what I tend to take usually. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಹೀಗೆ ಈ ಮರ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ತಗೊಳ್ತೇವೆ. ನಾನೇನ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, in addition to that, if you look at the right picture, it's the same trees, flowers, spring blossom ಇದು. So ನಾನೇನ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, just go there, different angle, portrait mode ಗೆ ಕನ್ವರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ iPhone ಅಲ್ಲಿ, ಅಥವಾ even Android would definitely have it as well. portrait mode ಗೆ ಹಾಕಿ ಟ್ಯಾಪ್ ಯಾವ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಫೋಕಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಟ್ಯಾಪ್ ಮಾಡಿ, and this is the result. Of course ಕ್ಯಾಮೆರಾ ಎಲ್ಲ ಆಟೋಮೇಟೆಡ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಹಿಂದ್ಗಡೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೋಜರ್, ಎದುರುಗಡೆ ISO, all of those gets automated, so it's relatively simple in that way. ನಮ್ಮ ಕೆಲಸ ಸೆಲ್ ಫೋನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ರೆ just compose ಮಾಡುದು, and basic that Anoop, Rajesh and even Sudheer ಅವರು ಕವರ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗೆ basics ನಾವು ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, camera will take care of the phone will take care of the settings, all of that. So ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಮ ರೈಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ just ಹೂ ಮೇಲೆ ಫೋಕಸ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು, ಬಾಕಿ ಇರೋದೆಲ್ಲ ಬೊಕೆ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಬಂತು ಪೋರ್ಟ್ರೇಟ್ ಮೋಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವ ಕಾರಣ, and I took it. Simple image ಇಂದ something that is professional photography, and the onus of the right image is purely because I wanted a background on my phone ultimately. So once you have that, so this is another thing I wanted to show the difference, story ಮತ್ತೆ composition ನಲ್ಲಿ. ಲೆಫ್ಟ್ ಸೈಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆರಡು ನಾನು ತೆಗೆದ ಫೋಟೋ. ಈ ಲೆಫ್ಟ್ ಸೈಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ usually we want to capture the image and the subject. Now we end up taking a quick one. ಅದೇ ನೀವು ಯೋಚನೆ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, okay, what else I want to show ಅಂತ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಈ ರೈಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಮೇಜ್ ತೋರಿಸಿದಾಗೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಈಗ ನಾನು ಇದೆಂತ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಸೊ ಬೇಸಿಕ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಫೋಟೋ ತೆಗಿಯುವಾಗ ಲೈಕ್ ಐ ಎಂಡ್ ಅಪ್ ಟೇಕಿಂಗ್ ಲೈಕ್ ದಿಸ್, ಹೀಗೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಫೋಟೋ ತೆಗಿತೇವೆ. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಫೋನ್ ಅನ್ನು ನಾವು ಹೀಗೆ ಇಟ್ರೆ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೀಗೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಐ ಎಂಡ್ ಅಪ್ ಟೇಕಿಂಗ್ ಲೈಕ್ ದಿಸ್, ಇಷ್ಟು ತಗೊಂಡದಷ್ಟೇ, ಅಂಡ್ ಐ ಲೋವರ್ಡ್ ಇಟ್. ಸೊ ಹಾಗೆ if you just change the angle of the photo that you're holding and then moving up and down and left and right, you can completely change the way how an image is captured as well. Idaralli I used the rule of third as well. Iga ಎರಡು ಲೈನ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ image ಹತ್ರ ಇರುವಾಗೆ, now even though it's a guideline, you can break it. If you know those rule of third, you can break it. And break ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ನಾವು ಇವಾಗ ನೋಡಿದ ರೈಟ್ ಸೈಡ್ ಇಮೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಇದು ನನ್ನ ಚಿಕ್ಕಪ್ಪ ಅವರು, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಡ್ರಾ ದ ಲೈನ್, he wouldn't be exactly on the dot, but nevertheless I feel it's a good photo. So this also gives some perspective about the area. Between the two, I would choose the right image over here because of the perspective it shows to from an image. So point and shoot ಮಾಡುವಾಗ, this is something I actually share with a lot of people. ಶೂಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಹೀಗೆ ಇರುವಾಗ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಹೀಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ರೆ ಆಯ್ತು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. The next one is basically subject and light placement. So Anoop cover ಮಾಡಿದಾಗೆ, when we go there, ಬಿಸಿಲು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, but we wanted something else, so it's completely opposite. You just have to make use of a different angle ಅಷ್ಟೇ. So for example, ಅದೇ ನಾವು ಸ್ಪ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಬ್ಲಾಸಮಿಗೆ ಅದೇ ಪಾರ್ಟಿ ಹೋಗಿರುವಾಗ 2 ವರ್ಷ ಮುಂಚೆದು, ಲೆಫ್ಟ್ ಸೈಡ್ ಇಮೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್ ಆಗಿ ಇರೋದು ತಗೊಳ್ತೇವೆ, ಹಿಂದ್ಗಡೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಕಾಣುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ಇಫ್ ಯು ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ನೋಟಿಸ್ on the left hand side, the beauty that we would have otherwise saw on location, it doesn't justify in the image on this left hand side. So what could I do it? ಅದೇ ಮಿಡಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದರೆ at least ಫ್ರಂಟ್ ಬಿಡಿ, ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಉಂಟು. All of those blurred, you are capturing the action, what is happening, the fact that ನೀವು ಸುಮಾರು ಜನರಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಹಿಂದ್ಗಡೆ, ವೈಟ್, ದ ಕಲರ್, ದ ಫ್ಲವರ್ಸ್, ಇಟ್ ಶೋಸ್ ಅ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಆಟಿಟ್ಯೂಡ್. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸಹ ನಾನು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಹೀಗಿರುವ ಇಮೇಜ್ ನಾನು ಹೀಗೆ ಸ್ಟ್ರೈಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಫೋನ್ ಅನ್ನು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕೆಳಗಡೆ ಮಾಡಿ ತೆಗೆದದ್ದು ಬೇಸಿಕ್. ಓಕೆ, ಲೈಕ್ ದಿಸ್, ನಾಟ್ ಲೈಕ್ ದಿಸ್, ಸಾರಿ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಇಮೇಜ್ on the right here, again I used rule of third, where idu chikkappa chikkamma illi, I wanted to show that they were biking. That's the story, and they are biking in a rural area. So how do I show it? I could have taken in a either as a portrait mode or as a landscape mode. Portrait mode al tegiyuvaga, it was a little bit closer, so now whoever is seeing this can see it clearly. That's the subject and the background a little bit. I use the rule of thirds, so either the subject is on the left side or right side. Typically, I don't take an image subject when it's in the middle, unless there's a reason to do so. That I feel brings a little bit better perspective in terms of the image and the story that you wish to say via these images. So that is subject and light placement. So light placement, Alyssa, which is something Anoop covered, which is basically direct sunlight ಬರೋ ಬದಲು ಅಥವಾ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಲೈಟ್ ಹಾಕೋ ಬದಲು, ಈಗ ವಿಡಿಯೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಾಗೆಲ್ಲ it's always better to have diffused light. That prevents face ಅಲ್ಲಿ shine ಬರೋದು. All of those are cut out by just diffusing the light. That's one thing. The next one is how do you capture action and movements?
In that the third photo you're showing earlier,
yes,
you have shown a lot of greenery by doing this 1/3 or whatever you said, right? But what about the focus? Are you focusing on your chikkappa and chikkama, or how is that works?
Yes, so this is something I wanted to cover a little further. The focus on this picture is on appachi chikkama. The focus is, so typically ನಾವು ನಾನು ಎಂತ ಮಾಡ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ನಾವು ಈಗ ಫೋಟೋ ತೆಗೆಯುವಾಗ I always tap on the screen based on where I want the focus. So phone generally understands the face tracking technology alla irutte. So generally it does a pretty good job. But ನಾನು ಒಂದು ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಆಗಿ ನಾನು ಟ್ಯಾಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ ಸಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. So that auto adjust exposure, focus, and of course the ISO and the lighting and everything automatically just by touching. So ನಾನು ಅದು ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ.
Thank you.
So next is how do you capture action and movements? Typically it helps. Now ಈಗ functional ಇರುವಾಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿ we are trying to take a picture. How do you capture that? The best tips is where I would say disclosure idyaradu nandu image alla. So I wish I took this picture on the left hand side, but still. So iPhone alli apologies, Android nange ashtu gottilla. So iPhone alli there's something called live photos to capture motion. So what it does is typically a second or so it records a video and then incorporates that into an image. So ivaga for example now ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ನಾವೀಗ Niagara Falls ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಟೊರೊಂಟೋಗೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ Niagara Falls ವಿಸಿಟ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. Niagara Falls ಹೋಗಿರುವಾಗ we end up taking a picture. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ movement of the water is never the case. It's a photograph. So generally we tend to accept ಈ live photo enable ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ as movement of water, which is pretty awesome. Niagara Falls though, you can capture it, I think up to a second or so you can capture it while your subject is focused. So at that time the meteor shower in the right side of it is actually GIF, so it may not be that much of an accurate. Your photo would look like something like this. So there would be some movement and there would be typically ಈಗ ಮಕ್ಕಳು for example if they are riding bicycle and you are taking a picture, use live photos. For others not so much. And in some instances stage ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಾಗ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಡ್ಯಾನ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಯಕ್ಷಗಾನ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲೇ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಇದು ಎಂತ ನಾವು usually ಇದು ತಗೊಳ್ತೇವೆ, we tend to click and there are a lot of motions happening. For some reason it's not charging. Sorry, ಒಂದು ನಿಮಿಷ, ನಂದೊಂದು ಇದಾಗಿದೆ. Okay, apologies. So usually capture ಮಾಡುವ ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ we want motion to capture the motion of the subject and the whole story. ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ we don't want it. ಈ ಉಸೇನ್ ಬೋಲ್ಟ್ ಫೋಟೋ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಐಡಿಯಾಕ್ಕೆ you don't want the blurry movements. ಆ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಫೋನ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈಗ ಬರ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಮೋಡ್ ಅಂತ ಬರುತ್ತೆ where it takes multiple photos a second, and then you can pick and choose what you want and then delete the rest. It's relatively easy in that way. So that, and these are very easy, you just swipe and you're there. Then the phone does a pretty good job in adjusting the settings. So these two are the things you may want to think about next time you photo tegoaga. It's very easy and it does the job for to capture our precious memories. So that is capturing actions and movements. So now that we have taken a lot of pictures, what next? So typically now we add filters and we are done with it. It's good. There's no good or bad in that. Especially when it comes to photography, ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇ ರೂಲು. ಸೊ ನಾನೇನು typically ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಒಂದು ಕ್ರಾಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಆ ಕ್ರಾಪಿಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ನೀವು ಕ್ರಾಪ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ರೂಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಥರ್ಡ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಆ ಗ್ರಿಡ್ ಲೈನ್ಸ್ ತೋರಿಸುತ್ತೆ. Then you can crop, you can crop according to that lines. You can do that as well. And then of course adding filters, which is relatively easy. But if you want some manual input into it, you can also manually adjust exposure and contrast. ಈಗ ನಾನು ಫಿಲ್ಟರ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ, very rarely I do use, sorry, but very rarely I use. So typically ನಂದು ಎಂತ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕ್ರಾಪಿಂಗ್, exposure and contrast, ಮೂರು ನಂದು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ನಂದು ಅಡ್ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ ನಾನು. It's relatively quick and I'm so used to it that done sort of. ಸೊ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೋಜರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಂತ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ವೇಳೆ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಲೈಟ್ ಸರಿ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಹಾಗೆ if phone doesn't do a good job, you can just toggle it to a point where you feel that should be. Phone in that case doesn't do a good job. Contrast ಅಲ್ಲಿ you can make that photo look a little bit more professional. ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ ಈಗ ಸ್ಕೈ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಈ ಇಮೇಜ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ರೈಟ್ ಸೈಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಸ್ಟ್ ಅಡ್ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಸೊ ದ ಸ್ಕೈ ಲುಕ್ಸ್ ಬ್ಲೂವರ್, ದ ವೈಟ್ ಲುಕ್ಸ್ ವೈಟರ್, and the green. So there is severe contrast there. It adds a different dimension. Should it be this way? Not necessary. New madide rules. So that's where photography is sort of, I would say, very inclusive, even for mistakes sometimes as well. And the other one, nimge, if you feel a little bit more adventurous, then adde iPhone ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ರೆ ಹೀಗೆ ಸ್ವೈಪ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ there will be ಒಂದು thermometer icon ಇರುತ್ತೆ, warmth or temperature. ಆ warmth adjust ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ. If I want to show sunset and I want it a little bit red, I just either decrease or increase depending on what mood I want the photo to convey. So that is something I do sometimes as well. And then if you feel even more little adventurous, because now you feel like, oh, I'm gonna take a printout of this at the end of the day, you can now use ನಾನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ highlights, shadows, brightness adjust ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. highlights ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಂತ ಆಗ್ತದಲ್ರೆ, ಎಂತಾದ್ರೂ ಬ್ರೈಟ್ ಲೈಟ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದು ಅಲ್ರೆ, you can bring it down by adjusting highlights. ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ಅನ್ನು ರಜ್ಜ ಡಾರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಿದ್ರೆ shadows. ಮುಖದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಷ್ಟು ಬ್ರೈಟ್ನೆಸ್ ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ ಯು ವಾಂಟ್ ಬ್ರೈಟ್ನೆಸ್ ಟು ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸ್, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಆಯ್ತು. ಬಟ್ ಮೈಂಡ್ ಯು, ನೀವು ಇದು ಅಡ್ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಅನ್ಫಾರ್ಚುನೇಟ್ಲಿ ಫೋನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಫುಲ್ ಇಮೇಜ್ಗೆ ಹೈಲೈಟ್ಸ್, ಶಾಡೋಸ್, ಬ್ರೈಟ್ನೆಸ್ ಅಡ್ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಫೈನ್ ಬ್ಯಾಲೆನ್ಸ್, ಅಂಡ್ ಅಲ್ಟಿಮೇಟ್ಲಿ all of these setting shows what kind of story you want to show in that. Lastly, levels. ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ ಎಂತ ಆಗ್ತದಲ್ರಿ, ಈಗ ನಾವು ಫೋಟೋ ಹೀಗೆ ತೆಗೆತ್ತು, ಸೊ ಇಫ್ ಯು ನೋಟಿಸ್ ಮೇ ಬಿ ಬ್ಲರ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದು ಫೋಟೋ ಹೀಗೆ ತೆಗುವಾಗ ಒಂದ್ಸಲ ಎಂತ ಆಗ್ತದೆ, ಸರಿ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಇರ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ತೆಗುವ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ. ಆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್ಸ್, ವರ್ಟಿಕಲ್, ಹಾರಿಜಾಂಟಲ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಈವನ್ ಟಿಲ್ಟ್ ಆಸ್ ವೆಲ್. ಆ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಅಡ್ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ ಈ ಫೋನಿನ ಲೆನ್ಸ್ ಇಂದಾಗಿ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಸರಿಯಾಗಿ ಬರ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ನಮಗೆ ಕಣ್ಣಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಣುವ ಹಾಗೆ ಬರುದಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಆವಾಗ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡುದಂದ್ರೆ, ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಎಡಿಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ದೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಆಪ್ಷನ್. ಆ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ ಒಂದು ಇಮೇಜಿನನ್ನು, ಹೀಗೆ ಇರುವ ಇಮೇಜ್ ಅನ್ನು ಫ್ಲಾಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಎದುರುಗಡೆ ತರಿಸ್ಬೋದು. ದಟ್ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ಅನ್ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಪರ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಇಮೇಜ್ ಆಸ್ ವೆಲ್. ಟ್ರೈ ಮಾಡಿ ನೋಡಿ. ಅದೊಂದು ಐ ಯೂಸ್ ಇಟ್ ವೆರಿ ರೇರ್ಲಿ ಲೆವೆಲ್ಸ್, ಬಟ್ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಸಮಥಿಂಗ್ ಐ ಡೂ ಯೂಸ್ ಇಟ್, ಅಂಡ್ ಐ ಯೂಸ್ ಆಲ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್ when it comes to ಈಗ ನಾವು ಹೈಕಿಂಗ್ ಹೋದ್ವಿ, we saw a nice little image, nature ಇದು, and I take it. I tend to adjust all of these, and this is, at the end of the day, it would look something like this. So matte once you feel you're comfortable doing all of this, you can take it one up notch as well. One of the ways of doing when you're comfortable, crop ಮಾಡಿ, filters, exposure, contrast, once you're comfortable, try shooting in raw. As a professionals, typically they shoot raw. ಈಗ ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ ಎಂತ ಮಾಡ್ತಂದ್ರೆ, ರಾ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ನೆಗೆಟಿವ್ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಎಡಿಟ್ ಇಟ್. ದರ್ ಇಸ್ ನೋ ವೇ ಅರೌಂಡ್. ನಂದೇ ಸುಮಾರು ಫೋಟೋಸ್ ರಾ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತಿದೆ, ಇನ್ನು ಎಡಿಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕಷ್ಟೇ. ಸೊ ರಾ ಅದೊಂದು ನೆಗೆಟಿವ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಇದೆ. But the positive is you can change the image from being flat to completely beautiful image that's print worthy. Raw if shoot ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಹೀಗೆ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಈಗ ಫೋನಲ್ಲಿ ಸಹ ರಾ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ದ ರೈಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಸೈಡ್ pretty much shows when you open up your camera app, top right corner ನೀವು ಟ್ಯಾಪ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ರಾ ಎನೇಬಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ನೀವು ಇದು ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ರಾ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಫೋಟೋ ಶೂಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಇಮಿಡಿಯೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಎವ್ರಿಥಿಂಗ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಫ್ಲಾಟ್. ದಟ್ಸ್ ಹೌ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪ್ಚರ್ಡ್. But ನೀವು ಎಡಿಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ that's one of the best formats ever. ನೀವು ಏನ್ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಎಡಿಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. You are not going to lose any quality of the image. The second one would be, if you feel even more adventurous, you can use external light source. I'm going to come back to flash here. Flash is something I don't recommend using on a cell phone. ಅದ್ರ ಬದಲು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟರ್ನಲ್ ಲೈಟ್ ಸೋರ್ಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಮಚ್ ಬೆಟರ್. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ದಟ್ ಈಗ ಈ ಇಮೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತೋರಿಸಿದ ಹಾಗೆ this kind of light usually tends to be diffused light, so it's soft on your face or on your subject which you're showing. So avaga the photo comes a little bit natural, just like how you see with your eyes. And the third one is to use your tripods and gimbal. So for example, ನಾವು ಹೀಗೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಸೆಲ್ಫಿ ಯೂಶಲಿ ತೆಗಿತೇವೆ. ಅದ್ರ ಬದಲು ಅಥವಾ ವಿಡಿಯೋ ತೆಗಿಯುವಾಗ ಈಗ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ವಿಶ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ, ಬರ್ತ್ಡೇ ಆನಿವರ್ಸರಿ ಎಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಟಿಪಿಕ್ಲಿ ಹೀಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದ್ರ ಬದಲು if you have it in a small tripod, it's relatively inexpensive, $10-20 ಒಳಗಡೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ you can get a good one, and that's good enough, and that will stabilize. So again, make sure your image when you hold it in a tripod, it's straight, so that gives make sure that is also true. And gimbal, so gimbal is typically used when you are going to move along with the camera, and that typically cushions any impact you would do while holding the tripod. So gimbal is basically stabilizer type, and it's relatively nice when you use that and record a video, for example. And finally, you can spend a lot of money into getting third-party apps to basically pretty much do exactly what a professional DSLR photo ತೆಗೆದು edit ಮಾಡುದು. You can do that in your camera as well. Now, the difference between DSLR and the cell phone, DSLR ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈಗ ರಾಜೇಶ್ ಅಣ್ಣ ಹೇಳಿದ ಹಾಗೆ ಸೆನ್ಸರ್ಸ್ ದೊಡ್ಡದಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಈಗ ಒಂದು 10 ಫೀಟ್ದು ಪ್ರಿಂಟ್ ಔಟ್ ತೆಗಿಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಇದ್ರೆ DSLR ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತೆಗೆದದು would be a much better bet than the one on your phone. Would it look good? Absolutely. For ನಮ್ಮ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ day-to-day activities ಗೆ it's more than enough, but sometimes you do really need professional equipments, and that is where the difference between your cell phone and the professional equipment shines. And finally, what to watch out for. This is something I highly recommend. Of course, these are not rules. These are something I use myself. First is flash photography. On your cell phone, primarily on your cell phone, I disable it. Flash only, there is absolutely no use case, at least according to me, where you should use a flash photography. We would rather use a third external light to your benefit instead of using your phone's flash. So it's not that much of a nanatra kelidre it just ruins the image. And the second one is digitally zooming before you take a picture. This is something most may not agree, but if you want to take a close-up image, take an image and crop it. That is much better than digitally zooming and then taking a picture. The reason being, when you digitally zoom, namdu ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ phone camera doesn't have physical zoom ಹೆಚ್ಚಿರುತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. Digital is software based, so that's where you start to see a lot of noises. Now, if you are going to look at an image on your cell phone, it's okay. But when you feel like you want to print it, sometimes it does happen. That time, the quality of the image will not be what you would want. So those are the two things that on a daily basis, I would say, watch out for. But try yourself, Nodi, and see if that works for you or not, because sometimes it does work. And that's all. I hope these are some of the things that I learned along the way, and I hope you all have enjoyed it, and I hope it is useful for all of you. Thank you.
Anantha, chat room ಒಂದು question ಇತ್ತು. Maybe you can answer to that question. I
Sure.
heard of external zoom lens for iPhones. Any experiences with them?
I personally do not have any experience with external zoom lens. I've heard good things about it, but I personally don't. So I apologize.
Okay, I have a question to probably everyone. So, what is HDR? When to use it, and when not to use it?
I can go ahead, but Anoop, Rajesh.
We can add on. You can go. You can start.
Sure.
We'll add on.
So HDR is high dynamic ratio. So adenta helidare. Iga ನೀವು on the twilight period ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ, where you are trying to focus. Let's say you are shooting your son, for example, or your kids in front of a bright sunlight. The camera doesn't know where to focus, and when you manually focus either on the sun or on your child, the camera automatically adjusts the exposure. So ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮುಖದಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಫೋಕಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಟ್ಯಾಪ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತೀರಾ. ಸೊ ಆ ಟೈಮ್ಲಿ ಎಂತ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ the camera will automatically compensate for the extremely bright light source in the back end. Avaga, it will make the light source even more bright so it can show your subject's face. And if you tap on the sun, your subject's face will be completely black, and the sun will look like normal. So HDR ali cell phone ali hege agtade andre, the camera, the software is intelligent enough to take 3 photographs. One, it will take where your exposure is on your face, which means the sun would be abnormally bright. And the second one would be the second image would be where sun is bright and your face is dark. And it will create a third image where both sun and your face, sun and your subject's face will be bright. And that balancing act is what the phone does, is what HDR does in the form of setting enable.
Okay, so when that was exactly my situation in like taking photos in front, probably in front of a sunset ಎದುರುಗಡೆ ತೆಗಿಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಇದೇ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಬರ್ತಿದೆ. So then if you are using HDR, then what should I tap on? Should I tap on my son's face or on the sun's face?
So at that time, it's best to tap on your son's face, as in your subject's face, enable HDR and take a picture. That's it. The focus would be on your subject's face, and both would be looking normal.
I think a general rule also to add on is whenever, especially makludu ಅಥವಾ subjects photos ತೆಗಿತಿದ್ದಾಗ subject ಮೇಲೆ always you tap on the subject, because they are the focus ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ focus ಕೂಡ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ and exposure ಕೂಡ set ಆಗುತ್ತೆ based on where you tap. ಅದರಿಂದ you tap on the subject always ಅನ್ನೋ ತರ.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah.
And there is another question on the chat. What software is good for iPhone pictures editing? If anyone.
So it depends on how complex you want to go. I used to use Lightroom. That's something you can get pretty advanced. But Ega iPhone's standard Photos app has a pretty good editing. ಈಗ ನಾವು ಒಂದು 20 ಫೋಟೋ ತೆಗೆದಿದ್ರೆ ಆ 20 ಫೋಟೋದಲ್ಲಿ if you keep on spending 15 minutes each, you will lose interest in photography. So adrinda I tend to use standard photos alle edit button ಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ I end up changing few things, and that is relatively fast for me as I take multiple pictures. Sometimes you want to take a specific photo for a specific. And the next one is, what is best way to store and display digital photos? Store and display of digital photos, you can use any external or Google Drive. It doesn't really matter. You store ಮಾಡುವ ಇದು generally, for example, in my case, I store in my Google Drive. That's my primary do. I don't have an external. I don't make use of an external drive. So relatively, external drive, Google Drive, it doesn't really matter. It's actually better. Nanu Google ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾಕೆ ಮಾಡೋದಂದ್ರೆ, ಅಥವಾ I also use iCloud to store and back up my photos as well. That way, if you have Apple devices, it syncs across all, and all the original with good high levels, good format, all is stored in iCloud, which you can use to print as well.
ಒಂದು ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಆಡ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಿತ್ತು, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈಗ ಸೇ ವೆನ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಟೇಕಿಂಗ್ ಫೋಟೋಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರದ್ದು ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡೋದಾಗ್ಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ಸ್ಟೋರ್ ಮಾಡೋದಾಗ್ಲಿ ವಾಟ್ಸ್ಆ್ಯಪ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್ ಅಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಸ್ಟೋರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಅ ಗ್ಲೋಬಲ್ ಸರ್ವಿಸ್, ಅವರು ತುಂಬಾ ಕಂಪ್ರೆಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಇಮೇಜಸ್ನ. ನಿಮಗೆ ನೋಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಕಾಣ್ಬೋದು, ಬಟ್ ಝೂಮ್ ಇನ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಅಥವಾ ಪ್ರಿಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋದಾಗ ಅದು ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಐ ವುಡ್ ಸಜೆಸ್ಟ್ ನಾಟ್ ಟು ಶೇರ್, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನೋಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಓಕೆ, ಬಟ್ ಪ್ರಿಂಟಿಗೆ ನೀವು ವಾಟ್ಸ್ಆ್ಯಪ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಡಿ. ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಇಮೇಲ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆರ್ ಅದೇ ನೀವು iCloud ಸರ್ವಿಸ್ ಥ್ರೂ ಅಥವಾ ಏರ್ ಡ್ರಾಪ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ತರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಸ್ಯಾಮ್ಸಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಏನೋ ಇದೆ. ಆ ತರ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ದ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಇಮೇಜ್ ವಿತೌಟ್ ಲೂಸಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟಿ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಫರ್ಡ್.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
Another question is, ಈಗ ಗ್ಲಾಸಸ್ ಹಾಕೊಂಡವ್ರು ಗ್ಲೇರ್ ಬರದೇ ಇರೋ ಹಾಗೆ ವಾಟ್ ಟೆಕ್ನಿಕ್ one should use? Is it possible by post processing, or you should be careful while taking photos itself?
You have to be careful when you take the photos itself.
Avoid flashes.
Post-processing.
Avoid flashes.
Yeah.
Majority of that, avoid flashes, and avoid making the person stand in front of the source of the light. So the moment you make it, like, you know, if there is a glowing light or a bulb or something in front of that person, and then you shoot a photo of that person, then that glare or flare will come on the lens in the sense the glass on the of the person.
I think post processing ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ರೇಂಜಿಗೆ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು, ಬಟ್ if it's already captured, you have to erase it. It's gonna lose that pixel, lose ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ, ಬೇರೆ ಏನು ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಬೇರೆ ಏನೂ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. So
but it's a huge task undertaking. Correct. For you. Yeah. Lightroom alagalla, you have to go for spot healing and other things in Photoshop. It's a major investment,
time consuming and
time and effort. Only thing, either you move, switch off the flash, either you move or make the subject move, so that you avoid that. ಈಗ ನಿಮ್ ಕಣ್ಣಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಣೋದೇ ಫೋಟೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೋದು. ಸೊ ಕಣ್ಣಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅವರು ಗ್ಲಾಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಸ್ಪಾಟ್ ಇತ್ತು, ಲೈಟ್ ರಿಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಇತ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ you try to avoid that when you are visually looking at that person.
Okay, I have another question. What causes this red eye, and how can we avoid having red eyes?
Red eye, madras aya.
Flash. I think
99% is flash.
Okay.
Switch off the flash is the best remedy for all those things. Okay. And again, in post processing, you can avoid it. You can heal them. Removal, red eye removal. There are even mobile editing apps have those features. Remove red eye option. So you can do that. It is not accurate though, but to a certain extent it can do that.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
The direct flash idre usually get it. So if you make it indirect or deflected flash, then probably you will avoid it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other question? Actually, I wanted to request Rajesh to display some of his photos. I don't know if you have time. Maybe Rajesh, do you think you can show some of your pictures in less than 5 minutes? I know it's too short for, but just to give an idea of what type of photos you have taken.
ನೀವು ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ, ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ರಾಜೇಶ್.
Okay, so here is one of the link which I posted in my in the chat, right? So you can see that some of the photos I've taken. This is one of my profile. So here if you can see that the shutter speed is lowered, and I requested my daughter not to move her face, because if I make her move, then her face also gets blurred. So I wanted only to capture this snow splash, right, in the blur motion blur, and her to be very sharp. So she is standstill, but you can see her hands are moving, hence that is blurred, and then the snow there, right? So this has some of my photos here. So this is taken by drone, the one of the waterfall, right? And this is again taken by drone. I started using Canon from 2003 with very old, 9 megapixel or 8 megapixel camera, digital, and even now I'm using Canon. So this is some of the photos. You can see that this is a low shutter speed, not a handheld. This is tripod mounted snowfall. You can see the snows are fighting each other because of the high wind. So this is again slow motion, but this is handheld because advanced cameras have image stabilization built in, lens or body image stabilizations. So you can go up to say 1/8 or 1/3 kind of a thing, how sturdy your hand is based on that. So you can even take such photos with advanced cameras. So this is again a motion. So the streamy motion of that. So these are some of the photos. And I used to write long back. I used to write blogs. You can see that I used to write a travel log of all the places I used to go. You can see a lot of these write-ups in my blog. So I pasted this URL, but I stopped writing after I came to US in 2015. So I don't know the reason.
Time to restart, Rajesh.
Yeah, I could. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one follow-up question. How important is the megapixel?
That is important especially for viewing how big screen are you planning to view that photo, and if you want to take a printout, how big you want to take a printout. If you are planning to take a 6x4 print, then even 4 megapixel is sufficient for that, or 8 megapixel is sufficient for that. But if you want to view the same photo in say 65-inch screen or 43-inch screen, then megapixel actually matters. If you're only viewing it on a mobile screen, then it doesn't matter. 12 megapixel is more than sufficient. So yeah, it purely depends on how you want to consume that.
Like ದೊಡ್ಡ print banner prints ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ you will have to have a high resolution, high megapixel photographs. So ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನೀವು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ.
So when I said sensor size, the sensor size it's also megapixel and sensor size, which makes sense, which makes most of those. So bigger sensor size with larger megapixel like Hasselblad and all, you can get up to 100 megapixel, 200 megapixel such bodies, and those cost also same thing, like $50,000, $60,000 kind of a price tag. But then you will be able to take a printouts of building size, right? So that's where megapixel and sensor size matters the most.
Okay, so I think we are almost we're reaching 7 o'clock. So before we conclude, I just want to thank everyone who are all involved in this.
One other small tip here, KP.
Sure.
So if you have seen the video on the screen, right? Anoop's video or my video or Sudheer's video or Ananth's video, my video is crystal clear. If you have seen, that is because I'm using SLR to stream my video into Zoom. So you can see that the difference itself there. So mobile camera or a laptop built-in camera or an SLR being used for streaming the video. So eh, all these makes the difference.
So Anoop or Rajesh, there is a question on the chat. I think either one of you can take the question.
Galaxy S21 format 12 Pro. I would say Galaxy S21 because that gives you a better megapixel, and it's a latest one, right? So I mean, there is always a trade-off between iPhone and Android phone. There are a lot of ups and downs on both. It's hard to say which one is the best. It really depends on from the camera perspective itself. If you look at Galaxy S21, I think that is a better camera than S21 or 12 Pro, at least as per what I've read through. I have iPhone 11 Pro Max, and I have Galaxy S20. So depending on what I want to take, so I sometimes uses one of those, and mostly I use my SLR.
Okay, there's one more question. I think Picasa, any experience using Picasa for editing?
Picasa ಇಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ಕೋತೀನಿ. Picasa used to be there by provided by Google long back. Right. After they bought Google Photos, they made Picasa Web Absolute. But it has that Lightroom kind of an feature where very basic editing. You can tonal adjustments or highlights and brights and shadows and things like that. Yeah. So that is basic capability of editing there.
Okay. ಸರಿ, ಹಂಗಾದ್ರೆ ಸೊ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಐ ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್.
ಸಾರಿ Krishnaprasad, 2 ನಿಮಿಷ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಐ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಶೋ a few photos if possible.
ಓಕೆ, ಶ್ಯೂರ್. ಯಾ,
ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ.
ಯಾ ತಗೊಳ್ಳಿ.
ಓಕೆ, ನಿಮಿಷ ನಾನು ರೆಡಿ ಮಾಡಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೆ. ಐ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಥಾಟ್ ಶೇರಿಂಗ್.
ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ.
ಸೊ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಕೈಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಮೆಸೇಜ್ ಕೂಡ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ ದಿಸ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ರೀಸೆಂಟ್ಲಿ ಬ್ಯಾನ್ಫ್ ಟ್ರಿಪ್ ಹೋಗಿದ್ವಿ, ಅಂಡ್ me and my wife Sahana. So ತುಂಬಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ we were really blown away by the beauty of the place. Andre the message is basically to kind of how to be sustainable, to retain these kind of places that we have, and that we just have one earth anotara. That's my take on it. So like this is one example where the Icefield Park went to between Banff and Jasper. You can drive, and it is one of the world's scenic drives. So this image was taken fall season ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಾಗ. ಇದು ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಒಂದು ಮಿಸ್ಟಾಯ ಕ್ಯಾನಿಯನ್ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ರಿವರ್ಸ್ ಹರಿಯುತ್ತೆ, ಅಂಡ್ ಈ ತರ ಅದನ್ನ ಕಲ್ಲನ್ನ ಕೊರೆದದು ಕ್ಯಾನಿಯನ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಆಗಿದೆ ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲಿ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಮೇಜ್ ವಾಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಟೇಕನ್ ದೇರ್. ಒಂದು ಅಗೇನ್ ಟಿಪ್ ಇಸ್ like all the things we have discussed, how do you put it into practice ಅನ್ನೋ ತರ. Like what I've recently seen, ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಜನ Instagram ಅಲ್ಲಿ there are many popular photographers. How do you show the magnitude? ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಜಾಗ ಎಷ್ಟು ದೊಡ್ಡದಿದೆ ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ you kind of have a person stand at a particular point that shows how big the place is. So that's a very nice way of showing it. ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಂಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಇಷ್ಟ ಆಯ್ತು, and I'm trying to follow certain, like getting inspired by ಆ ಥರದ್ದು type of photographs. So also like rule of third, ಹೆಂಗೆ ನೀವು ಇಮೇಜಸ್ನ like how do you draw the viewer's eye through the image ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನೀವು ಕಂಪೋಸಿಷನ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ಲೈಕ್ ಇದು ಅಷ್ಟೇ, ಅದು ಲೇಕ್ ಲೂಯಿಸ್ ಅಂತ ನೀವು ತುಂಬಾ ಜನ ಹೋಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಂಡ್ ಅಗೇನ್ ವಿ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಫೆಲ್ ಇನ್ ಲವ್ ವಿತ್ ದಿಸ್ ಪ್ಲೇಸ್. ಎಷ್ಟು ಸೆರೀನ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಅದು ನೀರು ಎಷ್ಟು ಸ್ಟಿಲ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಸಿ ದ ರಿಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಷನ್. ಇದು ಸನ್ ರೈಸ್ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಹೋಗಿ ವಿ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಗಾಟ್ ದ ಸನ್ ರೈಸ್ ಎಟ್ ದ ಟಿಪ್. ಅದು ಆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತ್ರ ಆ ಕಲರ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಆ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿಕಮ್ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ಲಿ ಬ್ರೈಟ್.
And so, only at that time you don't see anybody else, otherwise it's going to be pretty crowded.
Only you see photographers. So ಇದೆ ಲೈಕ್ ಪ್ರಿಪರೇಷನ್ ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ಕ್ಲೂಡ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ವೇರ್ ಹೌ ಡು ಯು ಪ್ರಿಪೇರ್ ಫಾರ್ ಅ ಮೊಮೆಂಟ್, ಲೈಕ್ ಯು ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಫಾರ್ ಅ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫ್. ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ ಸಿಗದೆ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಸೊ ಆಸ್ ಅ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ ತುಂಬಾನೇ ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಟು ಗೆಟ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಗುಡ್ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫ್ಸ್. ಇದು ಶರ್ಮನ್ ಫಾಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೋಗಿದ್ವಿ ಫಾಲ್ ಸೀಸನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ, ಅಂಡ್ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಸಮ್ಮರ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗಿ ದೆನ್ ಐ ಕೈಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಇಮ್ಯಾಜಿನ್ ಹೌ ಇಟ್ ವುಡ್ ಲುಕ್ ಇನ್ ಫಾಲ್. Then we went back in fall and I tried to get a fall photograph. So again, idella nimge ontara it's you try to create a story behind it, and also all that effort will be worthwhile if you get a good photograph. Couple more, idu Torrens Barrens anta illi dark sky preserve anta ide. So where you get very less light pollution, you can see Milky Way, adu naked eye gu kanutte. But this was taken, I thought of connecting a tree which is also made of like all the stars and the tree, everything is made of the same material, like it's all composing the same thing, it's in a different way. So I just wanted to connect like a tree to Milky Way. So this is my way of showing how do you connect another. And I think like this is the Neowise comet na nivella gottirbodu, and recently we were really lucky. Now Torrens Barrens hodaga, we like at that moment I saw this comet alli hogta irodu, and I was able to set up and then take a photograph. So again illu long exposure, many of the aspects we discuss adanella apply madbekagutte. So again you get a good result when you try to apply all those things in a right way. And idu I think my last image. So idu Richmond Hill ille hatra tegdiddu, and if you see rule of third idರಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಆಗಿದೆ because it's right in the middle. But ನನ್ನ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು, ನನ್ಗೆ what I wanted to do is using that ಇದೊಂಥರ ಮರಗಳ ಮಧ್ಯೆ ತೆಗೆದಿದ್ದು, and I wanted to use the greenery as a frame within a frame. So natural frame ಆಗಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ I wanted to focus on the swan. So like different way of composing images ಅನ್ನೋ ತರ. So I think that's all I have. Thank you so much. Thanks for letting me share this.
Sorry about it, Anoop, ನಾನು actually ಮರ್ತೋಗಿದ್ದೆ.
ಇಲ್ಲ that's totally fine. No problem.
I just looked at the time. Sorry about it.
That's all right.
Yeah, because already ಈಗ 2 hours ಆಗ್ತಾ ಬಂತು. Maybe people may want to leave for dinner or anything. Just before we conclude, I just want to thank all the 4 speakers. I think you are all really wonderful. You have wealth of knowledge, and of course we are all really proud of you. Thank you very much for taking your time. I know ಕೆಲವರಿಗೆ ಪ್ರಿಪ್ರೇಷನ್ಗೆ ಟೈಮ್ ಬೇಡ, ನಿಮ್ಗೆಲ್ಲ you are all pro at it, but I'm sure you would have taken some time to prepare. Thank you very much for taking the time to prepare and presenting your ideas here. And definitely photography, although it's a very big topic, it's a vast subject. I think you people have really covered the at least the basics. At least people get an idea of what photography is, and at least the basics. I think you have concised it and summarized it very well. I think people would have appreciated. So thank you very much. I don't have any token of appreciation. I think CHAA owes you a CHAA.
In your own houses.
Sure.
owes you a CHAA.
Okay, let us go to at least red zone, not even we'll be moving to only gray zone. So that will be in the account right now.
Yeah.
So I want to thank. Of course, it will be thanks to Rajesh for technical support for setting up Zoom account and YouTube and all those things. So thank you very much, Rajesh. And again, thanks to Naveen for introducing the speakers and presenters very well. Thank you very much, Naveen. And then, of course, I think we should thank Vinayakanna, Paramava, and Naveen for actually initiating or giving this idea of having this program. And I think people would have, at least the people who joined, I think they would have really appreciated it. And I know that the time is too short, and we have many more things to cover. You have many more things to offer. And hopefully we will have some more maybe the focused type of session, maybe one type of photography. You can focus on one type of photography and exhibit your photographs. Let us see if we can in the future, if we can get some opportunity, we will really we would like to hear from you, and we would like to see from you. Even if I look at your website and see these pictures, unless you explain it either the way you explained, I think that will be less effective. So let us look for some other opportunity and hear from you. And of course, I want to thank each and every one of the audience who have actually patiently listened to us for the last 2 hours. I hope. And the last thing I want to say is that I'm sure there are many good photographers in USA also. I think a few of them were in the audience, I'm sure. I think they would also like to share their opinion. Maybe in the future we can have a combined session from the USA, photographers from USA as well. That will be even more interesting. So once again, thank you everybody, and namaskara. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thanks everyone. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.